to ditch your boiler, new nuclear power plants and more trees. The government's blueprint for our future. There's a range of changes planned to how we heat our homes, travel and use energy.
Green works.
Get the ambulance in, pronto. We need CPR.
No.
Yeah, we need the ambulance in.
Should have stabbed him a bit more.
Also tonight, moments after she killed her husband, a corpse showing the arrest of a woman who says he was coercive and controlling. The aftermath of the explosion that ripped through an estate in Ayrshire and the remarkable stories of the lives saved.
Luckily enough, there was that one wee boy that showed his face underneath the rubble, and we've pulled him out and just right away from him.
And Ant opens up about his battles with addiction with the Duchess of Cambridge.
This is the ITV Evening News with Charlene White.
Good evening. The Prime Minister today unveiled the government's long-awaited plans to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2020, with investment for more electric vehicles, wind farms and heat pumps for our homes. Boris Johnson's pledge comes ahead of the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, and it's hoped other countries will follow Britain's lead. But the plans have been attacked by campaigners and political opponents for not going far enough. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Anushka Asthana, on the vision of the cleaner future.
Today, the government put the final touches to a strategy that they hope will eventually have us all doing things like this: installing heat pumps that don't use fossil fuels in place of gas boilers that do. For Angela Munden, it's part of a personal crusade.
I want to be carbon neutral. I want a future for my children and everybody else's children.
So as well as that heat pump, she's added double glazing and has solar panels and insulation on the way. But none of it is cheap.
I was going to get an electric car, but actually I can't afford that.
Angela had to cover the initial cost of her heat pump. And how much did it cost you?
16,500.
But because of a current government scheme that ends in March and pays out variable amounts, she'll be able to get back 10.5 grand over 7 years. For her, it's actually more in total than the new scheme that takes over in April. It will give homeowners in England and Wales a lump sum up front of £5,000 to help them switch over. But the average heat pump costs between £6,000 and £18,000, and the £450 million pledged will cover only 90,000 homes. The very visible reason that action is needed is set out starkly in the government's net zero strategy. It cites torrential downpours in London and devastating floods in the West Midlands this year as examples of what climate change is doing. Boris Johnson is not playing this down.
We face a challenge that is even bigger for humanity, a threat to our way of life that is ultimately far worse than COVID.
As well as boilers, there's action on wind and nuclear, planting trees and even controversial plans to link your mortgage to how green your home is.
Green is good. Green is right. Green works.
For environmentalists, this may be a step in the right direction, but without anywhere near enough money.
We need much more investment in public transport. We need much more to make our homes greener. And we need the government to step up and actually end new fossil fuel projects this year.
And that is not something that is guaranteed. Last week, protesters chained themselves to a giant statue of Boris Johnson outside Downing Street because a decision on the drilling of new oil is still pending. The government says there has to be a gradual transition from fossil fuels to protect jobs. But some think the change needed is more urgent. Boris Johnson put a conservative slant on this today, talking about the private sector, talking about markets. He says it's a green industrial revolution with 440,000 jobs. And last week I met offshore wind apprentices whose parents were in oil and gas, so a transition is happening. But there is some criticism from different directions. Labour say they would spend more money. Some Tory MPs worry about what this means for their constituents.
Anushka, thank you. And there's more detail on heat pumps, including how they work and just how much they cost, on our website, itv.com/news. A jury's been played a dramatic 999 phone call and body cam footage in the trial of a wife accused of murdering her husband. Penelope Jackson can be heard telling an operator that she thought she'd stab David Jackson in the heart, but said he hasn't got one. She admits manslaughter but denies murder, claiming he was coercive, controlling and physically abusive. From Bristol Crown Court, here's our correspondent Rupert Evelyn.
Could I get my coat?
Just bear with me 2 seconds.
In there. I admit it all.
All right.
Just get them. All right, I want to go in. All right.
No,
So-
he's on the kitchen floor.
Penelope Jackson has just fatally stabbed her husband. As she's restrained by police inside the family home, 78-year-old David Jackson is dying. His wife had dialed 999 but made it clear she wasn't going to save him.
You with him now?
Well, I might just go and stab him again, but...
All right, do not stab him again.
Why?
All right, madam,
I don't...
how many times have you stabbed him?
3 times.
3 times, okay.
Once I thought I'd get his heart, well, he hasn't got one, and then twice in the abdomen.
Penelope Jackson admits the manslaughter of her husband but denies that it was murder. Her defence, which started today, is that she was a victim of control, constraint and ultimately entrapment by her husband, and that following years of abuse she killed him because she could see no way out.
He's an aggressive bully and nasty, and I've had enough. And when he said you wouldn't do it, I did it twice more.
Married for 24 years, the couple lived in Barrow in Somerset, where she told the court she was petrified of violence.
I know what I've done,
All right.
and I know why I've done it, and if I haven't done it properly, I'm really annoyed.
The trial continues. Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, Bristol.
Leicestershire Police has been criticised for a serious and inexcusable failure to investigate properly the child abuse allegations against the late Lord Janner. A damning report by the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse found 2 anonymous statements weren't submitted to prosecutors. Our UK editor Paul Brand heard from one alleged victim who says he was ignored by police.
Lord Janner is no longer alive to face trial. Today, the accused are those who investigated him. Dozens of the most serious allegations against the former Labour MP, for decades treated as if they were anything but.
They would call us the naughty children. We were there for a reason.
This man says he repeatedly told police he was being abused by Lord Janner when he was 14 and in care, but felt he was the one treated like a criminal.
I told the police numerous times when we used to run away. They used to take us straight back. They started taking you back to hell. You run away from hell, and they'll take you back to hell. No questions asked. Why are you running away? Nothing. Just take you straight back and leave you there.
The claims against Lord Janner stretch back as far as 1955. It wasn't until 2000 that police first investigated, but witness statements were put in a locked drawer and the case was closed. Further allegations meant police started a second investigation in 2006, but again, there were no prosecutions. It was only in 2015 that Lord Janner was finally charged with abusing 9 children, but he died in December that year. Neither he nor his accusers ever got a trial.
It was clear that all these organisations, the police, the county council, really didn't consider these witnesses to be credible because they were children in care.
Today, all of those who'd been brought accusations about Lord Janner said sorry.
I'd like to start off with an apology to the victims involved in this case and also to commend their bravery for coming forward, and we should have secured the charges against Lord Janner far earlier than we did.
Lord Janner's son said today's report does not confirm any crime, but there'll never be a chance to prove his innocence or for his accusers to prove his guilt. Paul Brand, ITV News.
The brother of the Manchester Arena bomber has fled the country to avoid speaking at the inquiry into the attack. Ismail Abedi had previously asked for immunity from prosecution before agreeing to give evidence, but this was refused. His younger brother Salman blew himself up in 2017, killing 22 people. A court's heard that a man acted recklessly and dangerously when he arranged a flight for footballer Emiliano Sala. The prosecution told the court that David Henderson knew the pilot he enlisted was underqualified before it crashed in 2019. Mr. Henderson denies endangering the safety of an aircraft. The UK has reported its highest number of coronavirus deaths since March. The number of cases is increasing as well. Infections are rising mainly among school-aged children, but it's starting to spread to older and more vulnerable groups. There are concerns the slow uptake of booster jabs may put more people at risk of serious complications. Here's our health editor, Emily Morgan.
It's going to be lead to pinch, OK?
This is what we were told would save us from COVID this winter. Vaccine boosters and jabs for teenagers. But with cases now rising, there are questions over the speed of the vaccine programme. Ivor had had both his doses, but the 76-year-old died from COVID last month. He would have been in line for a booster, and his son says he should have got it sooner.
He was literally going out shopping, going into his hospital checkups and things like that. And he caught COVID. And 11 days later, he died. I genuinely do think a booster might have saved his life. And it's too late for that now.
The latest 7-day average of COVID cases stands at over 44,000. That's the highest since July. What concerns officials is that cases are now rising in the over 80s and not just in the younger population. The highest number of deaths were also recorded today since March. So what is going on?
We have relatively low social distancing measures compared to much of Europe. The other big thing is, I think, immunisations, that immunity from either previous infections or immunisations are almost certainly beginning to wane.
The NHS claims not enough people are coming forward for their booster. Just 3.8 million have had it, despite nearly 8 million being eligible. Critics, though, are not convinced.
Can I suggest he ditches the complacency and fixes the vaccination programme now?
Mr. Speaker, well, our vaccination programme has been one of the most successful in the world, and the right honourable gentleman may know that it's prevented 24 million infections. It's prevented some 230,000 people from being hospitalised, and 130,000 lives have been saved. I don't call that a failure, I call it a success.
Vaccines are still the government's plan A. Ministers, though, are watching COVID cases closely, hoping they won't have to change course. Emily Morgan, ITV News.
Still to come in the ITV Evening News, the shocking working conditions behind the HGV driver shortage and...
By the time I asked for help, it was bad.
Ant opens up to Kate about his struggles with addiction. Those stories and more after the break.
Welcome to your electrifying experience. Cupid plug-in hybrid.
Welcome back. There was official confirmation today of just how big the fall in HGV driver numbers has been in the UK. In the 4 years to June, there were 54,000 fewer on our roads. And as efforts continue to ease the shortage of drivers, ITV News has learned it's not just pay and visas that's putting many off. Many truckers are suffering poor working conditions, and police say they're particularly vulnerable to crime. Our consumer editor, Chris Troy, has this special report.
When we asked HGV drivers to keep video diaries, it soon became clear they often lack even the most basic dignities of working life.
There is a little toilet block over there, but that's locked up. This evening's loo is brought to you by empty stock of water bottles.
Hopefully get a shower tomorrow. If not, I'm having to put a lay-by. It may just be a baby wipe wash.
Lay-bys are bad enough, but even truck stops can leave drivers feeling vulnerable.
The trailer park is actually over there. It's not well lit at all, so I'm parking more or less next to the petrol station, just so we've got a bit of light on the truck to deter any thieves.
New figures given to ITV News show drivers are right to be concerned about security. There have been almost 3,000 crime reports so far this year, costing almost £300 million. Police have told us there isn't adequate safe parking and that drivers' welfare and safety is at risk.
We need more parking, we need safe parking, basically to be treated with respect as opposed to being treated like dirt.
So this is an example of this.
The head of Britain's biggest chain of service stations says more facilities are being built, but it's not always like this.
We've got footage that shows a shower facility at one of your sites. It's dirty, it's a mess.
I think that picture that you have is an exception to the rule. We spend more than £6 million on cleaning our toilets, showers, facilities.
What is stopping you providing more lorry parking spaces? They are so badly needed.
Yeah, look, I think the government have been very much asleep on watch. What the government should have been doing is setting targets and then supporting the likes of Moto and other operators in getting the planning consents that we need.
Amid all the shortages, government says it's working to increase lorry parking and has new planning rules. But HGV drivers that make our daily lives possible are too often not getting even the basics themselves. Chris Choi, ITV News.
A man who bravely rescued a boy who was trapped after a huge house explosion has told ITV News of his relief at finding someone alive. Alex Craig ran to help after hearing a loud bang last night in South Ayrshire. Incredibly, no one was killed, although 2 adults and 2 children are being treated in hospital, as our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith reports.
Within this pile of rubble now stands 3 houses. It used to be 4. One family home has completely gone. They were still inside when it blew up here last night, but miraculously everyone survived, with thanks to this man's bravery.
I heard this kaboom. There was still flames in that there. There was popping and crackling, and
you ran towards it?
Yeah, I was in the front of it. I had no other thoughts, just the fact of getting folk out of there as quickly and as safely as possible.
Before the fire brigade and the ambulances could arrive here, Alex was already searching through the wreckage. And then, against the odds, a child was found.
Kept the head, kept it cool, and I said to myself, "No, there's people going to be alive here." And then, luckily enough, there was that one wee boy that showed his face underneath the rubble, and we've pulled him out and just right away from him.
Can you describe your emotion, your feeling when you saw that little boy alive?
I can't explain it. I'm speechless, to be honest. I'm just so happy that he was there.
Police have confirmed the child Alex helped to rescue is now being treated in hospital, along with 2 adults and another child.
I'm surprised that anybody can survive that. Somebody must have been up there watching them, thank God. So
people would describe your actions as heroism.
I wouldn't say that. I put in as much effort as everybody else did. If it wasn't for such good people in here that we came together, God knows what else could have happened.
The investigation into what caused this has begun, but instead of mourning loss, this community now has a story of courage and a narrow escape. Peter Smith, ITV News, Ayr.
Northern Ireland's Public Prosecution Service has defended the decision to prosecute an army veteran over a Troubles shooting. Dennis Hutchins died in hospital in Belfast after contracting COVID-19, leading unionist politicians to raise concerns that the case against him had been allowed to go ahead. Michael Gove had to be escorted by police after anti-lockdown demonstrators attempted to surround him in the street earlier. Social media footage showed the cabinet minister quickly being encircled by police officers who moved the protesters back. And the boss of Britain's Food and Drink Federation has warned of terrifying price rises in the industry, which could get passed on to customers. Ian Wright told MPs inflation is running between 14% and 18% for hospitality firms. ITV stars Ant and Dec joined the Duchess of Cambridge today at an event trying to tackle the stigma of talking about addiction. Ant spoke about how opening up about his addiction to painkillers helped him turn his life around. And Kate, who's patron of the charity Forward Trust, warned that anyone can become an addict. Here's Sangeeta Lal.
They are the nation's pranksters that even royalty can't escape. Through the giggles, though, there was no hiding how much this awareness event hit home with Ant McPartlin, who's overcome his own addiction, something he shared with the Duchess of Cambridge.
But at the time I asked for help, it was bad. But then as soon as you opened up to people, problems start to disappear. You know, and it gets better and helps them.
And that's what it's really passionate about, is sort of the prevention.
If we're going to stop people hitting rock bottom, wherever that is, get help much earlier, just such
a turning point Ant says he wishes he'd reached before his drink driving fine in 2018, involved in a crash while over the limit and behind the wheel. For Kate, though, stories like Ant's are all too familiar. Working most of her royal life learning about addiction and how it affects people, she says prevention is what's needed.
The Duchess of Cambridge.
Now launching a new campaign to raise awareness.
It is all too rarely discussed as a serious mental health condition. And seldom do we take the time to uncover and fully understand its fundamental root causes.
Perhaps something this campaign might change, helping those affected learn they're not alone. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News.
And sticking with the royals and why the Queen insists she's still young at heart.
There you are.
I am, Your Majesty.
The 95-year-old who was today carrying out business as usual in a video call with New Zealand's new Governor-General. She was invited by Oldie magazine to become one of its Oldies of the Year. But in a letter from one of her aides, Her Majesty politely and firmly declined. She told them, "You're only as old as you feel." Couldn't agree more. That's all for now. Tom's here at 10. Bye-bye.